Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. With this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce RTX 4080 Super in Spiderman Remastered, a well-optimized title. This one is the Founders Edition model of the card. We are running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Ups. GPU 0 resizable bar is enabled, and over on the left, we're running it with a Ryzen 9 7950X 3D with half of its cores disabled. So it's basically the same as a Ryzen 7 7800X 3D, and over on the memory tab, we're using 32 gigabytes of 6000 MHz DDR5 in dual channel. Let's get into it, shall we? Okay, let's go for the settings first. I am starting at 4K resolution using DLAA as the anti-aliasing method. No upscalers are being utilized or frame generation here. And I am using the maximum settings here on the graphics quality settings, aside from ray tracing, which is currently turned off. But I will also try it out in this video. And look at this, guys. This is looking absolutely fantastic. High refresh rate experience. Look at those FPS. It's buttery smooth as well. This is what I like to see, okay? It's been a really long time of early access UE5 BS every single week, coming out. These totally unfinished games that are super demanding. But today, I thought we'd take a step back and see a well-optimized title for once, right? One that looks very, very good still. I mean, there's no ray tracing enabled yet, but it still looks really, really impressive. And it's open world, and it doesn't stutter at all. What a breath of fresh air, right? Alright, we've been swinging around. We saw the FPS in the park area. It drops down into like the lower 100s, possibly lower than that sometimes, but it's super stable still. And in a single player title, this is basically all you need. It's more than you need, actually. I'd be fine in this game with like 60 frames per second, yet this is doing 120 on average, and we've been to the most intensive area, which is the park area already. Aside from when you use ray tracing, when you do that, those buildings with a lot of reflections and stuff are actually more intensive because, well, the ray tracing is at work. Right here, it usually drops quite a lot as well. As you can see, it's only into the 1-teens. Not a problem. Okay, now we're on the top of the big city right here. Look at all of that detail, guys, at 4K with DLAA. No shimmering at all in sight. Let's get out of here and see the city from above here. 90 frames per second. This is also extremely intensive, dropping from that big building there. And it only drops to 90 FPS. Like, these are the FPS that you get in UE5 titles with frame generation enabled with a GPU like this, as well as DLSS. And we're not even using that, But let's try something a little bit different. I enabled frame generation right here. No DLSS, okay, just FG on. And I will restart the game because in this title, you actually do need to restart. And here we go. We're back here getting 150 FPS right now. I can't really see much shimmering, honestly, and the input lag isn't even noticeable because it's single player title and it's well above like 120 frames per second, so it feels fantastic with frame generation enabled. I'm actually going to start counting the FPS up there because just looking at the sky here, it's very easy to run like this, of course. All right, here we go. This is it. And okay, so now I think I can see a little bit of shimmering like right there. I don't think that was present previously before we enabled frame generation, but that's the only thing that's shimmering here. Obviously, the entire city is static when you look at it like this, so the frame generation doesn't really have any artifacting at all. I might be able to see, yeah, I think I see a little bit of weirdness around the character, around Spider-Man, with frame generation enabled, but it's not really that bad, guys. Like, it's so minor that you actually gotta look for the imperfections to be able to spot them. And let me just check if they have fixed one of the major issues with frame generation in this title, which was going up like this. You would usually see a lot of ghosting effects, but it doesn't really seem to be that noticeable here. Around Spider-Man, it is a little bit noticeable. I can notice a little bit of artifacting from frame generation, but it's so minor. Again, like, a lot of people are now playing with frame generation from FSR 3 and stuff in a ton of titles. to go from like 30 FPS to 60 FPS at 1080p low settings and stuff like that. So this will look 10 times better than that, basically, and they're still happy with that experience, you know. But honestly, in my opinion, I wouldn't enable frame generation here. There's just no point. The experience at native 4K with DLAA was just flawless already. Oh, and if you have a CPU bottleneck in this game, definitely enable frame generation, because it will get rid of that, you know. If you're seeing GPU usage fluctuating, FG usually helps it a lot, getting 99% GPU usage and more FPS, of course. So basically, if you don't have an X3D processor, do that. All right, I just restarted the game again, guys. We're at 4K resolution using DLSS quality and frame generation on top of it. I'm just curious to see like the highest FPS that we can get, basically. And look at that. It almost touches 200 frames per second. Obviously, if you play like this on a 32-inch monitor at 4K resolution, which is what I'm using right now, it still looks like native resolution, you know? A lot of other titles, especially UE5 games with TAA, they do look very, very blurry and soft at native resolution even, and this kind of looks a little bit better than those games, because this is actually super crispy at native resolution. You can even disable the TAA in this title, you know? But compared to this game at native resolution, I am now able to spot a little bit of more shimmering, you know, around the buildings with a lot of windows, like that one over there. Yeah, that's definitely noticeable there. Around the trees, it's not really that noticeable, honestly. To you guys, it will look like crap over here in the Central Park area, because unfortunately, YouTube's compression hates this area of the game. I mean, it's normal because there's a lot of detail being rendered very, very fast, and the compression just can't really keep up with it, unfortunately. So you can play the game with close to 200 FPS on average. I mean, it's a little bit far away, you know, it's 175 at the moment, but it's going to be buttery smooth, especially if you have like a 240 Hertz 4K panel. This might be your preferred way to play it, because it's going to feel fantastic. But to me, I think since this is a single-player game, once again, I would just stick to the native resolution and maximum settings without ray tracing, have a wonderful experience, buttery smooth one still, and just make it look that slight bit sharper with a little bit less artifacting coming from the frame generation. So yeah, that's it for the rasterization results and gameplay. I think we should move on to some ray tracing, because this is quite easy to run on a 4080 Super, right? Okay, I just restarted the game once again. We're still at 4K using DLAA, so I disabled frame generation and the quality DLSS, and now I have everything maxed out, including ray tracing. Aside from object range, this is extremely intensive, so I don't really recommend you to touch it. This is the default value, by the way, but these are on very high, which are the maximum, as you can see. Okay, so we're now playing the game at full-on 4K native resolution, all the bells and whistles enabled with ray tracing, maximum settings on top of it, and it's still above 60 frames per second, guys. See how well optimized games are supposed to run on GPUs like this, at least. I mean, I get that this is an older title. It came out on PlayStation first, you know, a few years ago, and even on PC it's a couple of years old already. But I mean, come on, how did we come from this to what we have today with UE5, Nanite, and Lumen, which are like 3 times more intensive than this, while looking maybe slightly better in some cases, right? It's absolutely insane. I hate the state of gaming, actually the optimization these days. But hey, at least we can go back and still play these older titles, which are absolutely phenomenal, you know, and much better than the newer ones. And they run great on top of that. So yeah, just play older games. I myself like to play older games, okay? Anyway, around here, Central Park area, as I told you, it's not the most intensive area anymore, although previously it was without ray tracing. That's because we don't have any real ray tracing stuff happening around here, and reflections and so on. It happens more in those huge buildings with a lot of windows. Let's take a look at the reflections here. Yeah, just licking a window here. It's getting around the same FPS as Central Park, actually. Now we got accurate reflections everywhere. Obviously, they don't look super great, but I mean, I don't need them to look super great, honestly. I will take the extra performance to have the reflections look great. Just great, okay? Instead of absolutely fantastic. Around here, 70, 69, 67, 65, 64. Oh yeah, I remember going down here is actually where it struggles the most with ray tracing enabled. As you can see, starting to stutter a little bit as well. That's a common thing that we've been seeing in a lot of titles when enabling ray tracing. The games just stutter. And right there, it actually dipped down from 60 FPS slightly to 57 actually. Yeah, it is... Well, it's still very playable, obviously, but honestly, I'm not sure if I would utilize these settings with a 4080 Super. With a 4090, maybe. You know, that can do 60 plus 100% of the time, obviously, using these settings. But a 4080 Super, well, since it does dip here and there into the low 60s and the high 50s, that's a little bit of a problem. So we require a little bit of upscaling, I guess, to make it a bit smoother, basically. It's still playable once again, but it's not what I'd go for. So what I'm gonna do is enable that frame generation first. It looks better than just enabling quality DLSS on its own. And here we are, back in this street, getting 100 FPS now. The input lag, however, is definitely a little bit worse. I can notice it, but since this is a single-player game, it's still acceptable. You get used to it in just a little bit, you know. Not a major deal. It's basically the input lag of half the FPS that we're getting, so a little bit worse than what we were seeing, even with some drops into the 50s previously at native resolution. But it's livable with. After all, again, a lot of people are using frame generation to achieve 60 FPS in games these days, although with lower-end systems, of course, and they can play the game. So if you really want ray tracing and no major visual quality loss compared to native resolution, and I mean this is still native resolution, it's just generating frames in between of the real ones, you know, you can still play it. Maxing out the game, just enabling frame generation, no need to use DLSS, you know, just with DLAA, it will play fantastic right here with like 90 plus FPS all of the time. We can conclude that since the other little area was the most intensive one, right? The little street. Yeah, this is basically only slightly worse than what we saw at native res without any ray tracing, you know, in terms of FPS, and it looks a little bit better in the reflections for sure. So if you want this experience, yeah, the 4080 Super can definitely provide over here. Okay, so I'm back from a fresh restart now at 4K using DLSS quality and frame generation on top of it. And now it's even smoother, obviously. Wow, okay. So I think, guys, right now, since the FPS are so high, those little frame time spikes are a little bit reduced, and you can have an even higher refresh rate experience with ray tracing, close to 144 frames per second on average at the moment. So that is phenomenal of an experience. Again, this is all the bells and whistles enabled with ray tracing maximum settings, and it's dropping into the 120s. Basically double of what we saw at the native resolution without DLSS or frame generation. And once again, it is barely noticeable that it's not running at native resolution, guys. I mean, again, compared to other titles running at native res, they are softer than this. So it's a great experience here, both visually and performance-wise. So actually, I think I would choose DLSS quality plus frame generation at 4K max settings with ray tracing enabled, and just native resolution without ray tracing enabled, because the higher the FPS apparently, the less stuttery it will be when RT is enabled. And it actually makes a little bit of a difference. That frame time seems to be a little bit smoothed out compared to previously without the DLSS quality. And again, like aside from some shimmering in faraway windows like those ones right there in the middle of the screen, yeah, that's super noticeable. Aside from those little issues here and there, the game still looks really, really good. Now, it can be slightly over sharpened, so you might want to adjust that sharpening slider a little bit to your taste. But yeah, that doesn't affect FPS, so whatever you choose there, you're gonna see exactly the same results right here. And this is great, guys. We're seeing a little bit of GPU usage fluctuation, actually, down into like the low 90% range. Interesting, 90% right there, 91, 92. I don't know if it's a CPU bottleneck. CPU usage is actually at 50% sometimes, so it could very well be. It's using like all of the 8 physical cores, and it doesn't really utilize the extra threads, you know? But yeah, even if that's the case, this is a buttery smooth experience. No problems whatsoever, once again. Even in terms of input lag, it's absolutely great because it's always above like 120 frames per second, or at least 115 frames per second. So yeah, this is a gorgeous and buttery smooth experience. Okay, so the next logical thing to do is test some 8K resolution since it's doing so well, right? We're at 7680 by 4320, no frame generation, no DLSS, actually no anti-aliasing this time around, and we're still with the maximum settings. Oh boy! Look at this! It is still a playable experience! At 8K! And this is native 8K, guys. You know, 7680 by 4320, it's 4 times the resolution as actual 4K, and yet it's doing about the same job as it would do at 4K resolution native in a UE5 title. At least a broken one, you know? I recently tested the 4080 Super in body cam. That got a lot of views, actually, in this channel. And this GPU at 4K native resolution was actually getting lower FPS than what we're seeing right now, guys. Okay, it dropped into the 30s very often. Obviously, that runs Nanite and Lumen by default, which is ray tracing once again. But this is 8K! This is freaking 8K resolution! Come on, developers, fix your damn games. At least don't enable ray tracing by default in UE5. Yes, please. Like these GPUs, 4080, 4080 Super, 4090s, 7900 XT, XTX, these are very strong GPUs, but I see a lot of comments saying, oh, 4080 sucks, 4080 Super sucks, 7900 XTX sucks, and stuff like that. Not so much because I don't really test the AMD GPUs, because they don't send them out, unfortunately. I have tried contacting them, they don't answer. Anyway, I see a lot of people saying that the 40 series are crap. I mean, the lower-end ones are definitely crap compared to what they are replacing, you know? Most of them, at least, for the money. But the 4080 and 4080 Super and 4090, these are beast cards, okay? It's showing right here. I'm not saying go out and buy one of them because they are extremely overpriced, all right? I don't think they're good value at all. I'm just saying that they're capable if the games are well optimized. Well, you know what? I kind of want to test 1440p still. A lot of people are still playing at this res with this GPU, so here we go. It's kind of not needed, really, since 4K ran so damn well, but here we go. We're getting 180s, 190s, 200s. Holy crap, it can get 200 plus sometimes. At this point, I'm more impressed about the actual CPU performance, because the last time that I tested this, I had the 5800X 3D, which was only capable of around like 200 FPS maybe? A little bit lower than that, maybe like 180 or something like that. And before that, I tested a lot of GPUs on a Ryzen 9 5900X processor, and that was only capable of around like 120-ish to 150. Yeah, this is actually not a bottleneck to the 4080 Super, as long as you leave ray tracing disabled, of course, because that's also very CPU intensive in this title. Even at 1440p, as you can see, it's fully GPU bound. Yeah, it could go a few percentile numbers higher than that. It's like hovering around like 96, 97% most of the time, but it's still GPU bound, okay? Oh, look at that. In this area, we're actually fully CPU bound. The GPU is at like 80% sometimes. All right, look at that. Crazy stuff. So 7800X 3D or 7950X 3D with the 3D cache cores enabled alone will gets you around 150 or 160 FPS minimum in this title, and the 4080 Super is still underutilized at 1440 in some areas again. Okay, so I just restarted. We're at 1440p, frame generation on, DLAA, max settings aside from ray tracing. And I guess if you... Oh my god! It's going up to 300! Holy crap, dude! That's insane! I guess if you have a 27-inch monitor, you might want to play like this, and the 240 hertz one as well. Like, instead of dropping into the 160s, we're getting comfortably over 240 FPS at all times. That is absolute insanity. Oh my god. Granted, this is all without ray tracing, but I mean, it's very impressive considering what we've been seeing lately. Oh boy. I'm just gonna see what it's capable of with ray tracing as well. Okay, so I'm gonna enable that, disable frame generation, apply, restart the game. Look at that, native resolution, ray tracing enabled, 1440p, 100 plus FPS, and it's CPU bound. Again, like, this is super CPU intensive with ray tracing in this game. 89% GPU usage there. 69% load. Amazing. It's not really stuttery. At least I am not feeling any stutters right now. And the frame time is pretty dang smooth, actually. So this is definitely an option for like a lower refresh rate 1440p monitor. I think this is a nice experience here. And let's see it down here near the cars. Yeah, it drops into the 90s, but it's real 90 FPS at real 1440p, like native resolution, you know? So, what the hell is going on? It actually does look really, really nice. And it's super snappy at the same time. There's absolutely zero input lag. That's noticeable here. That's awesome. Come on. Obviously, it's awesome. Even at 4K, it was awesome. I'm just gonna enable frame generation for the last setting of the game, restart, and that's gonna be it. Okay, I promise. This is a big video already. Here we have it, guys. 160s and 150s, 140s around here. Let's see it. Yep, on the ground. 140s. I guess it did drop into like the 130s once. Input lag wise, it's amazing still because it's above 120 FPS. Basically, with frame generation above 120 or even 100 FPS, it feels really nice still on a single player game. And alright, with all of that said and tested, I got carried away a little bit. I was only going to do 4K and 8K in this one and start recording a bigger video for the weekend after I was done with this. But no, I got carried away as usual. But yeah, that's been it. I'm not gonna test 1080p because what's the point really, right? Nobody should play at 1080p with this GPU. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, love you all. Bye-bye.